and welcome back to the Seed Lever interview series. I have the pleasure of sitting down with people like Steph here today, kind of teasing out some of the people and the ideas that are behind some of the fastest growing companies in the world. And Steph's joined me from Birdie. Steph's the head of sales over there, and I'm sure she'll have an opportunity to introduce the company, but just at a high level, Birdie is a home care management solution, which is trusted by some of the UK's most innovative home care providers. And Stephanie is leading Birdie's expansion at the moment off the back of a Series A round. So we've got a lot to talk about. Steph, thanks for donating some of your time with me today.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me on.
My absolute pleasure. So yeah, one of the things I guess I like to kick off with, because we all kind of end up in these positions. You're in a head of sales role at the moment. We all come from very colourful backgrounds. Did you want to give us a bit of an idea of how you found your way into Birdie?
Sure. So I was, it's an interesting one because I've always one day I always had my sights set on setting up a charity and just thinking with how hard you work on a day-to-day basis, I would love for that to be focused on how you can actually impact people rather than line the pockets of some of the wealthiest people in the country or the world. But I had always assumed that would be something that came kind of later on in my career, thinking about how you actually have an impact. And I was working for a large motor group up in Scotland, working on the idea of launching a tech startup for them. And I wasn't really looking for a new role, but I kind of had in the back of my mind that being based down in London and that company based up in Scotland, it wasn't necessarily a long-term thing. And I was approached about the role at Birdie and kind of thought all my Christmases had probably come at once, because it was combining a fast-growing tech startup with some brilliant, intelligent people, combined with actually that impact and that purpose. So yeah, it was as soon as I heard about it, I was pretty excited about it.
That's so good. I feel like we have so much to dig into on the charity side, because there's some really interesting people doing some really interesting stuff in the sort of the tech side of that. But you know, we all have a very colourful sort of founding story getting into there. One of the things I think, just having a little bit of a chance to get to know you, I think one of the things I've been excited to talk to you about is this concept of growth, and you're over there at Birdie now, which is scaling really quickly, and you're head of sales, so everything kind of rests on your shoulders in a way. I'd like to really just kind of dig into how you think about scaling the company, and I guess how you deal with some of the stresses that comes with that. A lot of expectations, a lot of people kind of reporting into you. I guess what gives you kind of the steely determination to sit in that role and drive that growth?
Cool. Oh, really good question. Well, I think it's a really interesting one, because so for me, what keeps me going is the fact that the impact of what it is that we're doing. So everything we do at Birdie is all about what we call service users. So we sell technology to home care providers, and those home care providers will have carers that go into individuals' homes. So if you typically, our whole mission is about radically improving the lives of older adults. So the people that we really care about, it's not necessarily our customer, who's the person buying the technology. It's actually the elderly person that's receiving the care. That's what we're really focused on. So anytime we're kind of fighting fires, getting stressed, or dealing with whatever problem arises, it's so important to come back to the why and the purpose. And for me, that's about how we can radically improve the lives of older adults. So we stay very, very focused on that. And from a kind of sales environment, I've been in sales in different guises for the last 8 years. And I think when you grow up in that career, you realize that things go wrong. Things go wrong pretty often. And it's important to realize that over time, you'll have ups and downs, but it does even out over time. And you learn this complete resilience that you maybe aren't necessarily equipped with before you go into your career in sales. And so for me, I kind of think it's like you always have conflicting priorities. So it's about working out like what's actually going to move the needle from a sales point of view. Like what is it that's going to help us drive that revenue? And then like coming back to my earlier point, like how is that revenue going to help us invest in our technology? And how can investing in that technology help to improve the lives of older adults? So it's always thinking about how can we move the needle. I think it's important though to like keep complete focus, because like there are so many conflicting priorities and you can be pulled in so many different directions. And for me, it all comes down to like the data. So what is the data telling you? Like, don't get caught up in the immediacy of the results now or the numbers now, but what is actually the data telling you, and what are your actions from there? And I think that definitely helps me keep a calm head. But then the other thing is just like getting that time away. I know we had mental health awareness week last week, but getting outside, exercising, having time with friends, having time with family, and it's something that I'm not the best at, but how do we make sure that you can kind of have that break and that space away to make sure that you're kind of bringing your best self to work every single day?
Yeah, that's so true. You know, when you were speaking there, Steph, I had this thought in my head, which is, you know, I wouldn't imagine I'd ever find you working at selling used cars. There's something in there where I was talking to you and hearing some of the things that you're saying about sales, about how it's a long-term game, and you know, we've kind of gone beyond it being transactional. I thought, yeah, one, I bet Steph's never sold a used car before, but two, it just shows me how much this whole sales industry has just changed, and we're, you know, you're now really focused on, yeah, solving these really long-term kind of large sticky problems. But
Yeah.
I just kind of wanted, actually just digging into that, because you know, you talk about like the long term and, you know, not being swayed by, I don't know, maybe week to week or quarter to quarter. How do you go selling that to, I guess, you know, the people you report to? Because that's always the hard thing, I think, is like getting, you know, founders or investors to think, you know, over the long term and kind of back you in. Have you got any, I guess, tips around that, or anything that you found that's worked?
I think, well, so it's all about working backwards. And that's what sales has always taught me. It's like that, um, like if this is what we're working towards, and I probably get this from sport as well. If this is what we're working towards, what does it mean that we need to do? Like, what are the building blocks to get us there? Because don't focus too much on that like end goal. You have to think about the building blocks that will take you there. So for me, when we are at the moment, we're recruiting across our mid-market and our enterprise team, and growing that pretty rapidly. And a large proportion of my time right now is spent interviewing and trying to find the best candidates available for that. And instead, I'm doing that over sometimes like running demos or being part of the actual sales process. The sales process is going to get us revenue now, but actually we need to be getting the right people on board to build the team for the future and build the right processes for the future. So I think as long as there's complete understanding about what it is that you're all working towards, then, and everyone's clear on your roadmap to get there, then that helps. There's inevitably though going to then be discussions about wanting to delve into this data point, wanting to understand this challenge, wanting to spend time on this project in another part of the business. But again, for me, it's coming back to like, these are my priorities and this is the capacity that we have, and we can only do so many things. So would you like me to continue focusing on what it is that we've agreed, or would you like me to spend time digging into this data over here? And by the way, this is what the impact of that data is going to be and how it's going to help inform us. So I think it's that complete clarity about where you're going and how you get there, but then also reminding people if they try to pull you away from what's important, like making sure they understand that you can't necessarily do everything.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I personally have struggled with that so much, you know, in previous roles. You know, there's kind of a short-term objective and a long-term objective, and balancing that. But I think it speaks to two things. You know, one, you obviously have like quite good systems over there, which tell you, you know, when you say you're using data. I mean, you know, it's a lot of clients I work with, a lot of their systems are just in a complete mess. So, you know, having data at all, and then having data that's clean enough to use is one thing. But then actually being able to sort of communicate that, and I think, you know, in a really mature way, to management. is another thing. You tapped on something there around hiring. One of the really big things I wanted to ask you, I guess, was around how you manage like the ramp time for your reps. I mean, you're hiring a lot of people into the team. I'm not sure what the percentage is, but I imagine it's quite a high percentage of people would be in their first 6 months of joining Birdie, and you're a little bit further down the road. But I guess what have you learned about that onboarding piece that's kind of allowed you to get people to be pretty effective in their roles as quick as possible?
Yeah, I think it's something that's quite aspirational for us, because I think we've got, like, there's so much good stuff that we do in our onboarding, but I think there's a lot more that we could be doing. So for us, we know that it's by no means perfect, but we're doing pretty well. So I think the first thing is, like, be so prepared. Make sure that you are prepared with, like, resource and who's going to be doing what and how you can kind of pull that together. So we do, for example, we do onboarding sessions where a different leader from the business will run kind of a presentation, 45-minute to an hour presentation of, like, this is what my part of the business is, this is what we're working on, this is who does what. And we have those sessions running once a month so that it's pretty, like, concise and succinct. And I think it's so important to use your team. Like, I am so lucky with the sales team that I work with, that they are so eager to do peer-to-peer coaching, to have trading sessions together, to have someone listen in on their calls, to give someone an overview of the industry. Our AEs love having our new SDRs as part of their demos as well, because they want to share their learnings and they want to get people up and running as quickly as possible. And that's partly to do with, like, the culture of the team, but it's also to do with, like, how we've articulated to the team about these new joiners. So for example, like, my AEs want to progress, and for them to progress, we need to make more money, right? So for us to make more money, they need to close more deals. For them to close more deals, they need more meetings. So I was like, cool, so you've got your new SDRs on board. It's all of our job to get them up and running as quickly as possible. And do you see how that impacts your progression? So I think that's probably quite an important bit as well. Constant feedback is so important, I think, because, and that's both ways, because, again, coming back to the point of, we're not, like, our onboarding process isn't perfect at all. And so it's just asking them for their feedback. And one of the things so we had these 3 fresh-faced SDRs with no previous experience joining our team. And the feedback that I got in the first week was, this is information overload. Like, holy shit, I can't possibly process and digest everything that is coming my way. Like, I've never worked in a company, let alone understood a product or what marketing does, or how, like, what an SDR is actually meant to do. And so just, like, distill it down to what they need to know at the different stages, and then constantly get that feedback. And then there's 2 other things I would say. And, like, one is presentations. So, like, I had to do this one in my first graduate job, was I had to every single week present to my team on a different topic. And it was a way of, like, condensing your learning so that you can kind of distill it down into a succinct message and then kind of practice your presentation skills. And then off the back of that is just celebration. And again, it comes down to our culture. Like, I don't have to think about doing this, because my team is voting for their, like, MVP of the week as the new starters, or they're, like, shouting out to the company about how one of them has done this, this, and this. And so there's this real culture of, like, celebrating the successes and supporting each other with the learning that I think really help make it a team effort and kind of spread the load on onboarding.
Yeah, I mean, on that, because when I was listening to you, like, say that, I think one of the things that really stuck out to me was this culture element. And I was sort of wondering in my head, is that something that grows organically, in a way? Because, like, in that, your team is kind of, coming up with all this stuff, and they kind of we create these little rituals, within us, and ways of sort of rewarding each other socially, or is it something that kind of is premeditated? Like, I don't know, is there sort of an effort over there to kind of seed a bit of culture and then see it grow? I think that's probably a lot of different opinions on it. I'm not sure kind of how you guys approach it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've maybe not necessarily thought about this before, but we'll go with it. So first of all, it's very important to clearly define your culture and to make sure that there is complete agreement as to what the culture is and that it truly replicates or reflects the company environment, right? And then I think there's the interview process. And I think particularly when you're scaling, like you just need to make sure that you're not just thinking about the technical skill set, but you're also thinking about that cultural fit. And if you assess based on that cultural fit, so we have a stage in our interview process where a salesperson will meet with someone that isn't in the commercial function or the revenue function at all. They have nothing to do with revenue, but they'll assess that individual on their cultural fit. So that's really important. So it's like set out the culture and agree upon what it is, then interview for it and be so strict on that culture. And then thirdly, I think it's about like pushing out that ownership and accountability to everybody. And so naturally, when you're the head of sales or head of marketing or whatever your role may be, I think you do have to police it to a certain extent and make sure that if there are behaviors like you've got this culture of feeding back about actually that's not on, and you've got to be, the team have got to feel comfortable with challenge and calling each other out and calling me out if they see something that doesn't align with the culture. But I think this ownership piece is so important. And like as a leader, if you see something in someone, you encourage them in that direction and go, right, cool, I'd love you to champion this. Can you go ahead and coordinate X, Y, and Z? And you leave them to it, and you're there for guidance when they need it, guidance and help. But I think like we hire, like in the world of startups, we hire such brilliant people who have got the most amazing initiative. So it's just like utilize that initiative in the form of your culture and how individuals can help shape it, because yes, it comes from top down, but it can't only exist at the top. It has to be replicated across all levels.
Yeah, I think that's really sensible. And thanks for obliging me on that question as well. I hear your answers and I feel like I want to go 3 different ways with my next question. So, I mean, this is probably on that culture point, and I guess something I like to ask probably of anyone in your position, particularly you're growing so fast, and I kind of have this model in my head where like every time you double something breaks, and because we're in maybe things that I work on that double break, but I kind of have this idea that with a startup, when you're scaling, like everything feels like it's on fire just all the time, because you're doubling monthly, maybe even. But one of the things I think as it relates to culture is what tends to happen over the course of a company is you might have a founding team, or you might have people who've been there for a long time, and they're kind of the well, or like the bedrock of culture in a way. And then you come along and you rapidly hire, and now there's kind of this tale of 2 companies where you've got people who've been there for a long time, and you've got a bunch of people who are brand new. It sounds like you sort of spoke to it before, but just in terms of, I guess, if there was someone else that was in your position that was thinking, well, hey, we've got to go and hire 10, 20, 30 reps over the next however many months, and it's worried like, hey, are we going to be diluting our culture? Is there anything else sort of specifically on that point that you'd add?
So this is a real like challenge for us at the moment, because we've got such important roles that we need to fill, but we're not willing to compromise on the culture. And so I think like as you grow and as you get bigger, there's a need to have very specific like technical skill sets in different roles. And so when we hire, we are hiring for 2 things. You're hiring for the technical skill set, and you're hiring for the cultural fit. So you've got the technical and you've got the cultural piece, and you shouldn't compromise on either, because as soon as you do, like, you're not going to have that recipe for success, in my opinion. And there can be a number of different challenges when you start to recruit those roles. So for example, there may be a position that somebody internally wanted, right? But they don't have the technical skill set to actually take on, or expertise to take on that role. Or perhaps people are nervous about newcomers coming in and how they will impact, and like you say, perhaps dilute that culture. So for us, like when we've been looking at it, we've been thinking about, we haven't compromised on those things, and we've also made sure that the team understands, again, to my earlier point, like how is this role going to actually impact my personal growth? So if, for example, you take the decision not to do an internal promotion because you're hiring externally, it's important that that individual understands clearly like where the gaps are in their technical expertise. We're not talking about caliber, we're talking about technical expertise, and what you're going to do to help them get there, and how this individual coming in is going to help them. So a prime example for us at the moment is our enterprise sales director position. We want someone that has navigated multi-million-pound deals, and we don't have anybody internally that has done that. Now, our AEs want to develop in that space. So it's by saying, like, if we bring in someone that has like industry best practices that can implement these processes, think how much you're going to learn and how well you'll be set up for success when that team grows and you're able to move in. And by the way, this is what you need to do to get there. So I think that's a really important part of it, because the worst thing about impacting the culture negatively is that you lose the people that have driven that success and can still add so much value. But then again, it's that piece around how are you assessing somebody during an interview process. So we've got an assessment grid that again looks at the technical skill set and the skills and abilities that are required, but then also the value set that is required. And we have to see people evidencing this throughout the interview process to make sure that they're right to come on board. And then you have this like deeper dive cultural fit interview where you really delve into someone and what makes them tick and what motivates them and what kind of drives them.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys have really, really thought about it. Can I ask you a controversial question? Maybe controversial, maybe not so much. Say you absolutely, have to hire for cultural technical fit. Say you can't find the people for that, or say it takes you longer than you would like, or those sorts of things. Do you resist the pressure to get someone who's good enough on there in order to get hit the targets in terms of headcount, or do you hold off and find exactly the right person? And if you hold off, how do you how do you push back on management, investors, people, outside stakeholders who would prefer that you just sort of get on with it?
So this is what I'm living through at the moment. And I had so we've just secured our Series A investment, as you've mentioned, and we've got Index Ventures on board, which is just phenomenal in so many levels, because they're top tier VC, and they're very aligned with us as well on our mission and the fact that like the impact that we're trying to have. And I went to my first ever board meeting, and I was the other week, and the biggest pushback we had was that we're not hiring fast enough. And we've stepped our hiring up a level in terms of like the caliber that we want, because we're really strict on it, and we're not going to compromise, because it's the people that drive the success of a business. And as soon as you compromise, you're compromising on the success of that business. So I think for me, like, you don't have to have the perfect fit, but it's about understanding what the non-negotiables are, and then sticking to those, and then thinking about how you're going about your recruitment process. And is it that you're failing to attract these candidates? And if so, like, why? Is it that you're losing candidates through the interview process? If so, why? And really delving into what's going wrong in your recruitment process, as opposed to we've not found the right person, therefore we're going to settle. Like, we've got big ambitions, and we're not going to do that if we're not going to achieve those ambitions if we don't hire the right people. But I've been pushed really hard on that by my co-founders that have told me not good enough. Like, I've had people that I want to hire, but we've decided not to, because there's been the collective decision that they don't quite hit the bar that we need.
Don't worry, I've done that too. I've put plenty of candidates in front of founders who haven't gotten the job, but we get better, we progress.
Exactly.
Okay, so one of the, I guess, just final things I kind of wanted to ask was, been speaking to you probably for the last half an hour, and like Steph, you clearly know your stuff. You're dropping bombs on us, and this is, I believe, your second head of sales role, but I think a lot of people that I speak to, this is sort of they might have just been promoted into a position similar to yours. It might be their first time around the track, or maybe even just their first time in sort of a venture-backed company. And I think what a lot of people experience is this, like, I don't know, for lack of a better term, imposter syndrome, where you think, I haven't done this before. There's a lot of people asking me to do a lot of things, and it's like really high stress, and I have to get it done. But I think my question's two-pronged. I guess just it'd be interesting to hear your kind of perspective on it, whether you've experienced it, and is it something that kind of gets better over time? I mean, is it better your second time around? Is it or is it still something that you kind of have to have strategies in place for managing?
I'd probably say it gets worse over time, if I'm being totally honest, but I enjoy it. Imposter syndrome for me gets greater, but I enjoy it more. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So I've always thought that like where I am is by fluke. So if I think about back to like my hockey career, I was really lucky with my hockey career that I played. I say career. It was very much like a social thing, but I like competed at Scottish National One League, and I was playing against people that were competing in the Commonwealth Games and the Olympics. And I always just explain myself as, well, I just tried really, really hard. I was just the person that was willing to run endlessly and never gave up. And that's why I was on the team, because you could always count on me turning up at training. I was at every single game. I ran like a maddie, and like they liked having me on the team for that reason. The reality is everyone did that. Like I wasn't necessarily as skillful as the other players, but I deserved my spot on the team. But I always thought I was there because other people made me look good. And this is definitely carried on through my career, this feeling of someone's going to figure it out like sooner or later. And then when I was at Venue Scanner, so Venue Scanner I moved from being in the world of recruitment into SaaS, right? So I hadn't been in SaaS, I hadn't been in like B2B sales, but recruitment is very similar in so many ways. You're selling to businesses. Your product is just a person that has an opinion and cares about where it ends up. So whilst it's like the software that I sell at the moment has an opinion about whether it wants to be in that home care agency or not. So there's like an additional kind of complexity to it, or so I like to tell myself. But moving from that into Venue Scanner, and then Venue Scanner was a pre-Series A company, and then going from that into Birdie and trying to position myself as I'm the best person for this role was really difficult, because I didn't necessarily believe that I was. And whilst I have complete confidence and conviction in my future self, I always believe that there are better people out there. And one of the things that through that process that I learned was someone described it as pluralistic ignorance. And the reality is that you sit there and you're like, you keep your thoughts about yourself to yourself because you don't want to get found out. And then what you don't realize is that everybody else is thinking the same thing about themselves, but they're not willing to talk about it. And it was only when people that I have so much respect for, and I just thought you have all the answers, started to tell me about their feelings of imposter syndrome, and I started to hear it, that I started to realize that actually maybe that like sounds quite familiar and is kind of what goes on in my head. And there was someone, I've written this down, so there was someone that said there are ways that you can identify are anxiety, self-doubt, perfectionism, and fear of failure. So they're four of the key aspects of imposter syndrome. And the first thing is like you hear it, right? And you realize that you're not alone. Like even Einstein thought that his work got a lot more attention than it deserved. So the first thing is like hear it. As soon as you then start to talk about it, it's like this weight off your shoulders, right? And you say it to someone and someone else is like, yeah, that's how I feel. That's how I feel. And so you talk about it. But then you can actually, and this is the bit why I say, like, I get really excited and I quite enjoy it now, is because you then learn how you harness it. So if you're being asked to go into an environment that you're not familiar with, it forces you out of your comfort zone, and it forces you to then go and research, because you don't want to fail. You don't want people to catch you out. So you go and you work hard to make sure that you don't get caught out. And what you end up doing is delivering really good results. And so it's like, how can you actually harness it? And what I've realized is that when I'm at my best, like my absolute best, is when I'm completely out of my comfort zone and I feel like a total imposter. And that's when I produce the best results, and I'm my most like efficient and effective self. So with it all, like whenever I mentor a few people, and for me, it's just like, hear about it, like talk about it, and then harness it and use it to your advantage, rather than think it's something that's going to hold you back.
So you actually use the fact that you feel like an imposter as a bit of a signal to yourself to be like, hey, I'm out in front here. I'm really pushing my boundaries.
Yeah.
That is like a really, really good reframe for that. I think that's like really helpful.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of things you said, anxiety, fear. These are also just generalized emotions that I think like everybody has as well. So it might be interesting to trace some of that back to think, are you just in a really challenging role? I think that's really cool, the way that you've managed to sort of work that in. So you mentioned you're mentoring some people. Is that have you had any, like, seeing other people with it and sort of helping them? Has that kind of helped you reflect on this as well?
Yeah, because I think like you basically assume that what you know isn't special. Everyone knows what I know. Everyone can do what I can do. Like, and but I think when you then give this advice to someone, and so for me, like, hear it, talk about it, harness it, I'm like, yeah, but actually that might really resonate with someone and go, right, okay, that really helps me. And so I think, like, the more you talk to people and like explain these things to them, or your own experiences, and then they share their experiences and you can learn from that, the more that you actually just, it evolves and you both benefit from it over time, for sure.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, I wish I had someone like you around to help me when I was when I was in a similar position. Maybe we'll have to talk after this, but maybe a good way to finish this off. And Steph, by the way, thank you so much. Like, you've been so generous with your time, and I'm really excited for everyone to listen to this stuff. But I think one of the things I like to ask people is just about any contrarian thoughts you have, and I'll just premise this by the fact that well, pre-COVID, we're all flying around and going to different cities, and or at least I feel like we're all sort of reading from the same books on SaaS. Like, I feel like there's 100 books that have been produced, and we're all kind of reading the same ones, and it kind of creates a bit of an environment where we're all reading, saying, talking the same sort of language and the same things. You can kind of take this question from two angles. Is there either something that you think like everyone's just accepted, but actually is just not good advice, or is there something that you think you're doing or Birdie's doing that everyone's just overlooking, and people should be trying to use in their businesses? You take it from either angle.
Really good question. Okay. So this is probably, it kind of relates to the previous question of imposter syndrome, and the world of like what you're saying about we're all reading the same books, we're looking in the same places, we're talking about the same things. My biggest bugbear is that people who are deemed to be the best fit for a job are people who have been there and done it before. Like, that's a real, for me, that's not accurate. Just because somebody has been in a Series A company that's gone Series A, Series B, Series C, that doesn't mean that they're the recipe for success, or they have the recipe for success. It means that they've been in a company that's been successful. We all know that so many different people contribute towards the success. So I think people get quite blinded by brands on CVs and what that means about the caliber of the individual that you're interviewing with. And the reason I started to do some research on it because I felt really passionately about it, but being the person that's coming from recruitment into the world of SaaS, or from a seed company to Series A and be like, no, you don't need to have been there and done it. And they're kind of going, well, what do you know? There's a lady called Liz Wiseman, and she talks about a concept of rookie smarts. And the idea behind rookie smarts is that the best people to hire are the rookies, the people that don't have the answers. And the reason why is because if I've been there and I've done it, I rely on a data set, right? And my data set is isolated to my previous experiences. And then I might then try and apply the same processes, methodologies, answers into this new environment and assume that it will work because my data is telling me that it will. However, if you're a rookie and you don't have that data set, you're forced to actually go out and collect it. And that's why there are these different networks that are just amazing, that if you don't have the answer, you can go out and speak to people who have the experience and you can collect their data sets. But then what you can do is you can combine it so you've got a larger data set and also with different contexts so that you can work out what is right to implement in your own organization. And so I am a firm believer that you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to have the network, the resource, the intellect, and the willingness to learn, and the realization that it might take you an extra few hours versus someone else. But as long as you're willing to put that graft in, you will get there. So that's probably my one. You don't have to have been there and done it to be the best.
I think that's a big challenge because that's what everyone's looking for, right? And it's weird because then we put ourselves into these boxes. What do they say? When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So that's kind of to your point around that.
Yeah.
Well, Steph, look, it's been so great to chat to you as always. If there's any resources that you want to point people to, whether it's your LinkedIn or company website, I'll give you an opportunity to do that now. I guess just give people a bit of an idea where they can sort of hear more from you.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn is probably the first step. So Stephanie Livingston, and the Birdie website, and our link, Birdie on LinkedIn, has got all the jobs. We're recruiting a lot at the moment, and we're looking for brilliant people who want to have an impact and to join us. And whether that's now or whether that's in the future, it's that journey isn't really going to stop. But yeah, I welcome any connections. I love connecting with people that I haven't met before. But thank you so much, Bryce, for having me on, because it's been awesome chatting to you. And yeah, I'm just gutted that you've been having to listen to what I have to say rather than everyone getting to hear all the wonderful things that you have to say.
No, not at all. No, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, Steph. So yeah, thanks for your time. All right.